So what gives your skin its color? So we have gone through the functions of your skin. We have talked about all 3 layers of your skin. So this last little bit is just on color. So there are 3 pigments that I'm going to talk about that contribute to skin color. The first one is one I have already mentioned, and that is melanin. Remember, this is made by melanocytes. This is put in vesicles called melanosomes. This gets taken up by keratinocytes. It protects your cells from UV rays. Melanin also gives your skin a color. And melanin can range in color from person to person. So melanin can be yellow in color, very light in color, or it can go to a reddish brown to a black pigment. So Caucasian, if you are white, if you are Caucasian, your melanin is going to be lighter. It's going to be more of a yellow color. African Americans, your melanin is going to be much darker, more brown, more black. The darker your melanin, the more protection you have from UV rays. So this is why Caucasians have a much higher incidence of sun-linked skin cancer. It's because our melanin is not nearly as protective as opposed to someone who has a darker melanin, okay? It is responsible for things like little pigmented areas like moles and freckles. That's where you might have local accumulations of a whole bunch of melanin in one little area. Another color is called carotene. Think like beta carotene. So carotene is this yellow-orange pigment. And it is most obvious in palms and soles of the feet because your body will store it. This is the same thing. It's the same pigment that gives different vegetables an orange color. So think like sweet potatoes and squash. So when you eat foods that are rich in beta carotene, right, sweet potatoes, squash, carrots, anything that's orange in color, then you will accumulate more carotene in your body, which is an orange pigment. And so you might notice if you eat a lot of carrots, you might notice that your palms might have a little more orange tint to them. In fact, there are some studies that were done where they tested beauty, and they found that people, when they looked at images, they said that individuals who had more beta carotene, they didn't know this, but people who had more beta carotene, so they had a little more orange hue to them, were actually more beautiful. So if you want to be prettier, just eat more carrots, eat more sweet potatoes. I guess that'll work. But I know my son, when he was little, I used to make all his baby food. Which is actually pretty easy if you have the little contraption, you can just steam it and squash it and you're good to go. And so he loved sweet potatoes. That was his absolute favorite. So a lot of times I would add sweet potatoes to something else. And so he got sweet potatoes like every day. And at one point I looked at him and I was like, you're looking a little bit like a Oompa Loompa. I'm gonna have to cut out the sweet potatoes. So like I could tell like his palms were getting really orange. So you just have to be careful not to overdo the beta carotene. And then the last pigment is hemoglobin. Now you all should know what this is. I'm sure you've heard of hemoglobin before. Hemoglobin is that red pigment that we find in our red blood cells, makes our red blood cells red in color. This is also what is responsible for giving us sort of this flushed pink hue to our skin. And so the reason is because your skin gets a blood supply, right? So the more blood you have pumping to the surface of your skin, the more flushed or pink color you'll have. This is why people will pinch their cheeks, right? And try to get the blood in that area so that it looks like they have on blush. This obviously is going to be something that's more noticeable the more fair your skin is. So the more yellow or light your melanin is. People who have really fair skin, a lot of times their undertone of their skin is much more red. And that's just because we can see the hemoglobin easier. The darker your melanin is, the harder it is to see that hemoglobin underneath. Okay? So those are our 3 skin tones. And the very last thing I'll mention are just, it goes along with skin tone. These are just some abnormal skin colors that we might find. So the first one I have listed up here is called cyanosis. This is when you do not have enough oxygen. And when you don't have enough oxygen, your red blood cells, that hemoglobin, goes from being a really nice bright red to being a little more purplish or dark blue in color. And so that obviously is going to make your skin go from looking nice and pink and rosy to being more blue in color, right? And that's just from lack of oxygen. So think about, if somebody's not breathing, what color do their lips turn? They turn blue in color. Your lips are red in color because you have a lot of very superficial capillaries. So that red color in your lips, you're seeing the hemoglobin underneath. So if you aren't breathing and your blood changes color and gets more blue, you're going to notice it in your lips. Where we actually notice cyanosis is more often in the beds of our fingernails. So I remember as a kid when I would go to the pediatrician, they would always look at my fingernails. They would be looking at the bed of my nails, making sure that they were nice and pink. Pallor or blanching. This is a pale skin tone, and a lot of times this is from emotional stress or even low blood pressure, right? When your blood pressure tanks, think of pressure as in like, think of like filling up a water balloon, right? The more water you put in it, the more pressure there is in there. So that's kind of how I equate blood pressure. If your blood pressure is low, you don't have enough pressure to push your blood out to the surface of your skin, so it doesn't look nice and rosy. You look really pale. You look really drawn, right? Emotional stress can also cause your blood pressure to go down, and that can also cause you to look really pale. Okay, so this is just that your face has drained of color, right? You've gotten some bad news, and your face is drained of color. You've lost that blood pressure. If your blood pressure is always low, you might always look a little pale. Jaundice, this is a yellow skin tone. This is actually from a liver disorder. So your blood cells only live in your body for about 120 days, after which point they get taken out of circulation and broken down into pieces. Hemoglobin is one of those pieces that we have to break down. It's in your red blood cell. And as hemoglobin gets broken into its parts and pieces, one of its byproducts is called bilirubin. And you don't have to remember all of this, I'm just telling you. Bilirubin usually gets taken up by your liver and it comes out from your feces. Your liver takes up the bilirubin from your blood and excretes it in bile, and it comes out the other end. If your liver's not working, then it's not taking up that bilirubin, and bilirubin is hanging out in your body. Bilirubin has a yellow color to it, and so your skin tone will look more yellow. The whites of your eyes will get yellow. A lot of babies are born jaundiced. And this is just because their liver is very immature. They haven't been eating solid foods yet, so they're not having bowel movements yet to get rid of the bilirubin. So a lot of times if a baby is born jaundice and they have that yellow skin color, a lot of times they look like my son had a little jaundice. He looked sort of tan, oddly enough. And so his was not bad enough. His bilirubin count wasn't high enough to cause any concern. So they just said, make sure he's having dirty diapers and he'll be fine. And sure enough, a week later when they checked his bilirubin, it was down because his liver was processing, putting that bilirubin into his intestines, and he was pooping it out. If your bilirubin count is really elevated, a lot of times they might put babies under a Billy lamp. It's where they put the little goggles on them, they put the UV lights on them, and it helps to break the bilirubin down faster. And then the last one is bruising. Bruising are those black and blue marks that you get in your skin. This is just because you've broken a blood vessel and your blood is clotting in that area. Okay. So those are just some abnormal skin colors that we find.